Hey there, tonight we're settling into a story that was never meant to rush. In ancient Greece, some myths weren't told to shock or entertain quickly, but to linger, the way a thought lingers just before sleep. This is a tale shaped by quiet choices and lasting consequences, where the gods did not always shout their judgments, and punishment arrived gently, one moment at a time. If these slow journeys through ancient myth bring you a sense of calm, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or leave a peaceful comment, perhaps noting where you're listening from or what time the night has reached you. Only if it feels restful. Now let your breathing soften, let the day fade behind you, and allow yourself to drift back into a world where even silence carried meaning, and every choice left a shadow. In the shadow of a crumbling temple, where the wind carried whispers from olive branches long bent by time, a man named Theron stood at the threshold of his modest home. The sun dipped low, painting the hills in blood and gold, but he did not watch its descent with awe. Instead, he placed one hand on the wooden doorframe, feeling the grain worn smooth by generations of similar pauses. For in this world, every step was not chosen, but foreordained, a thread pulled taut by unseen hands. And in that tautness lay not freedom, but the subtle sting of inevitability. The day had unfolded as all days did, measured, unyielding. A procession of duties etched into the very soil. Theron had risen with the first grey light, his body moving before his mind fully stirred, drawn by the rhythm of necessity. He had milked the goats in the pen behind the house, their warm flanks pressing against his palms, the milk steaming faintly in the chill air. Each squeeze of the udder was a small ritual, a quiet affirmation of his place in the order of things. The animals did not resist. They knew their role as surely as he knew his. From there, he had walked to the fields, the path worn deep by his feet and those of his father before him. The earth was hard, baked by summers past, but it yielded to the plough as it always had. He guided the oxen with a low murmur, their heads bowed under the yoke, hooves sinking into the furrows. Sweat traced lines down his back, gathering at the waist of his tunic, but he did not pause to wipe it away. Pausing would imply choice, and choice was a luxury the fates did not grant lightly. By midday, the sun stood high, a merciless eye overseeing the labour. Theron sat in the scant shade of an ancient olive tree, breaking bread with cheese and olives from his pouch. The flavours were simple: salt, oil, the faint bitterness of the fruit, but they grounded him in the tangible. Around him, the valley stretched quiet and vast, dotted with other figures bent to their tasks. A woman drawing water from the spring, children herding sheep along the ridge, an old man mending a fence with deliberate knots. None looked up. None questioned the pull of their paths. As the afternoon deepened, Theron returned to the plough. The oxen strained, muscles rippling under hide, but they did not falter. He felt the same strain in his own limbs, a dull ache that spoke of endurance, not rebellion. The furrows lengthened behind him, straight and even, carving order into the chaos of untilled ground. Birds wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the silence, but they too followed invisible currents, bound by the same unseen laws. When the light began to slant, casting long shadows that reached like fingers across the land, Theron unyoked the oxen. He led them to the stream, watching as they drank deeply, muzzles breaking the surface in slow ripples. The water was cool, clear, fed from mountain springs that had flowed unchanging for centuries. He cupped his hands and drank as well, the liquid sliding down his throat like a momentary mercy. Then he turned toward home, the plough left in the field, its blade gleaming faintly in the fading sun. The house was small, built of stone and thatch, nestled against the hillside like a secret kept from the world. Smoke rose thin from the chimney, signalling his wife's preparations within. Theron approached without haste, his steps measured, each one sinking into the dust. At the door, he paused again, longer this time. His hand rested on the latch, but did not lift it. Instead, he listened. The soft clink of pottery inside, the murmur of a voice soothing a child, the distant call of a shepherd bringing in the flock. These were the sounds of a life, woven tight, without loose ends. He entered at last. The interior was dim, lit by a single oil lamp on the hearth. His wife, Elara, turned from the fire, her face softened by the glow. She held their infant son in one arm, stirring a pot with the other. The air smelled of stewing lentils and herbs, earthy and warm. Theron nodded once, a gesture that carried the weight of the day without words. He removed his sandals, placing them by the door with care, then washed his hands in the basin, the water turning cloudy with soil. They ate in silence at first, seated on low stools around the rough, hewn table. The child fussed briefly, then settled against Elara's chest. Theron chewed slowly, savouring the warmth that spread through him, countering the fatigue in his bones. After a time, Elara spoke, her voice low and even. The oracle's messenger passed through the valley today. Theron looked up, his spoon pausing midway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. What did he say? She met his gaze steadily. The harvest will be meagre. The rains will come late. And for our house, a shadow falls across the child's thread. The words hung in the air, not sharp, but heavy, like stones placed one by one on a scale. Theron felt them settle in his chest, joining the others that had accumulated over the years. He did not ask for details. Details changed nothing. The fates spun, measured, cut, mortals endured. He rose after the meal, brushing crumbs from the table into his palm, scattering them outside for the birds. The night had fallen fully now, the stars emerging cold and distant. He returned inside and approached the small altar in the corner, a slab of marble etched with faint symbols, adorned with a figurine of the Moirai, the three sisters who held all threads. He poured a libation of water from the pitcher, watching it pool and seep away. Clotho, laxis, atropos, he whispered. If the shadow must come, let it be swift. The lamp flame flickered once, then steadied. No answer came. None ever did. Elara prepared the child for sleep, wrapping him in soft wool, laying him in the cradle carved from olive wood. Theron watched from the shadows, his arms crossed over his chest. The infant's eyes closed quickly, a breath evening into the rhythm of innocence. But innocence, too, was fleeting, another illusion in a world where every beginning implied its end. As the hour grew late, Theron lay on the pallet beside Alara. Her hand found his in the dark, fingers intertwining without force. They did not speak of the oracle's words. Speaking would not unravel the knot. Sleep came slowly, as it always did, a reluctant surrender to the unseen. Theron's thoughts drifted to the fields, the oxen, the straight furrows that would wait for him at dawn. But beneath it all lay the shadow, not yet formed, but inevitable. In the quiet of the night, the house breathed softly around them. The wind outside stirred the branches, a faint rustle like threads being drawn through a loom. And in that rustle, the first hint of the cost emerged, not loud, not sudden, but persistent, like a distant drum echoing through the hills, calling toward what could not be turned away. Dawn arrived pale and reluctant, a thin blade of light sliding between the hills. Theron woke before the first bird stirred, his body rising from the pallet, as though pulled by the same invisible string that had drawn him to sleep. Alara still breathed evenly beside him, her hand resting near but not touching his. The infant in the cradle made small, dreaming sounds, soft suckling noises, innocent of the weight already gathering above his head. Theron dressed in silence. He moved through the dim room with practiced care, avoiding the loose floorboard that always creaked. The lamp had burned out during the night. Only a faint smell of spent oil lingered. He stepped outside, barefoot, the ground cool and damp beneath his soles. Mist hung low over the valley, softening the outlines of trees and rooftops, making the world seem briefly kinder than it was. He walked first to the goat pen. The animals stirred as he approached, pressing against the wooden slats, warm breath clouding the air. He opened the gate, let them spill into the small pasture, watched as they lowered their heads to the sparse grass. One old doe, white, muzzled and slow, paused to look at him. Her eyes were calm, untroubled. Theron reached out, rested his palm on her forehead. She accepted the touch without flinching. He envied her that acceptance. From there he moved to the well. The stone rim was worn smooth by countless hands, his father's, his grandfather's, the hands of men long turned to dust. He drew the bucket slowly, the rope sliding through the pulley with a faint, rhythmic groan. Water rose clear and cold, splashing against the sides of the wooden pail. He drank first, then filled the smaller jug he carried for the house. The act was simple, repetitive, yet each pull of the rope felt heavier this morning, as though the water itself knew the shadow the oracle had named. Returning to the house, he found Alara already awake. She knelt at the hearth, coaxing embers back to flame with careful breaths. The infant lay beside her on a folded blanket, eyes open now, staring at the ceiling beams with unfocused wonder. Alara did not look up when Theron entered. The child slept well, she said quietly. No question, no plea. Only statement. Theron set the water jug down. He will continue to sleep well, he answered. Until he does not. Alara's hands paused over the kindling. Then she resumed her work, feeding small twigs to the growing flame. The firelight moved across her face, high cheekbones, steady mouth, the faint lines beginning to gather at the corners of her eyes. She had been beautiful once, in the way young women are. Now she was beautiful in the way enduring things are. They ate together in the grey light. Barley porridge thickened with goat's milk. A few dried figs from last season. The child nursed while they ate, small fists opening and closing against Elara's breast. Theron watched them both, memorizing the curve of the infant's cheek, the way Elara's fingers brushed the soft down on his head. These were the moments the fates could not steal, not yet. After the meal, Theron rose. He took the jug and walked the path to the spring, farther than the well, where the water tasted sweeter and the moss grew thick on the stones. The mist had begun to lift. The sun burned through in thin shafts, turning droplets on the leaves to brief sparks. Birds called now, sharp, territorial cries that carried across the valley. He passed the old olive tree, its trunk split by lightning years ago, yet still bearing fruit. He touched the bark as he always did, a small ritual of acknowledgement. At the spring, he filled the jug again, then knelt and washed his face. The cold shocked his skin, sharpened his senses. When he looked into the water's surface, the reflection stared back, older than yesterday, eyes deeper, set, mouth set in a line that had grown permanent. He did not linger on it. Reflection was another mirror the fates used to remind mortals of their place. On the way back, he met the neighbour's son, a boy of 12 carrying firewood. The boy nodded politely, then hesitated. "Father says the oracle spoke of our house too," the boy said. A broken plough. A late frost. Theron looked at the child. The boy's face was open, unmarked by years. "Oracles speak," Theron said. "The earth answers." The boy considered this, then continued on his way, arms loaded with wood. Theron watched him disappear around the bend. The path curved, hiding the boy from sight, yet the sound of his footsteps continued for a moment longer, small, steady, already following the line drawn for him. Back at the house, Elara had taken the child outside to the small patch of herbs she tended. The infant lay on a blanket, kicking gently, grasping at the air as though he could catch the sunlight itself. Elara knelt beside him, pinching leaves from the thyme, releasing their sharp scent into the morning. Theron set the jug down. He stood watching them a long time, arms folded, but feet planted in the dust. The sun climbed higher. The mist burned away. The valley opened itself fully, fields, hills, the distant gleam of the sea. Everything in its place. Everything moving toward what had already been decided. And in that perfect order, the shadow waited, quiet, patient, already beginning to lengthen across the thread of the child's life. The sun reached its zenith, bleaching the valley white. Theron walked the furrows again, alone now. The oxen rested in the shade of the olive tree, heads low, tails flicking lazily at flies. He carried no plough this time, only a small bronze sickle and a basket. The work was lighter, but the purpose heavier. Gathering the first ripe figs from the tree that had stood at the field's edge longer than memory. He moved slowly among the branches. Each fig he touched he turned gently, feeling for the softness that signalled readiness. Some he left. Some he cut free with a single clean stroke. The fruit fell into the basket with soft thuds, heavy with sweetness and the heat of the day. Juice stained his fingers purple. He did not wipe it away. The stain would remain until evening, a quiet mark of labour. From the ridge above came the faint sound of children playing. Shouts, laughter, the sharp crack of a stick against stone. Theron glanced up once. 3 small figures darted between rocks, chasing something only they could see. One was his neighbour's boy, the same who had spoken of broken ploughs. The others were younger, their voices higher, freer. They ran without direction. Yet even their games followed invisible paths. The same rocks climbed. The same hiding places claimed. The same patterns repeated summer after summer. Theron returned to the figs. He did not call out to them. Children, too, had their measure. Interrupting would not lengthen it. When the basket was full, he carried it back down the slope. The path wound narrow between stones worn round by centuries of feet. At one turn he paused, habit, not weariness, and looked back at the field. The furrows lay straight, the earth still damp from morning dew. In the distance the sea shimmered, a thin silver line beneath the haze. He watched it a moment, then continued. At the house, Alara waited beneath the awning. She had spread a cloth on the ground and arranged the midday meal, the last of yesterday's bread, olives, a wedge of cheese, and now the fresh figs. The infant lay on his stomach nearby, kicking at the air, small hands grasping fistfuls of dust. Alara knelt to brush the dirt from his fingers, then lifted him to her lap. She did not speak of the oracle's words again. Instead she broke the bread, handed Theron his portion, and waited. They ate in the shade. The figs burst open under the teeth, sweet, warm, faintly floral. Juice ran down Theron's chin. He caught it with the back of his hand. Alara watched him eat, her own bites small and measured. The child reached for a piece of fig, curious, then smeared it across his cheek. Alara smiled, brief, soft, gone again. The smile did not reach her eyes. After the meal, Theron rose. He carried the basket inside, placed the remaining figs in a clay bowl on the table. Then he went to the small chest where he kept his tools. He lifted the lid slowly, as though expecting something else to be there. Inside lay the bronze sickle, now cleaned, the plough blade he had sharpened last winter, a coil of new rope, and beneath them all, a small wooden box, unadorned, but no larger than a man's palm. He took the box out. It had belonged to his father, who had received it from his father before that. Inside lay a single lock of hair, dark, curled, tied with a thin strip of linen. The hair belonged to the child, who had not lived past his first winter. The first son. The one whose thread had been measured short. Theron held the box a moment, then closed it again. He did not open it often. Opening invited memory, and memory was a weight he carried already. He replaced the box, closed the chest, and stepped outside. Alara had taken the infant to the herb patch. She sat on the ground, the child crawling between rows of thyme and oregano, crushing leaves beneath his palms. The scent rose sharp and green. Theron watched from the doorway. The afternoon wore on. The sun slid westward, shadows lengthening across the yard. A breeze moved through the olive branches, stirring them in slow waves. Somewhere far off a dog barked, once, twice, then silence. The valley settled into the hush that comes before evening, when the heat releases its grip and the world exhales. Theron walked to the spring again. This time he carried no jug. He simply knelt at the water's edge, cupped his hands, and drank. The cold was deeper now, reaching into the chest, steadying the breath. When he rose, he looked at his reflection once more. The face that looked back had not changed, yet the eyes seemed older, as though they had already seen the shadow lengthen. He returned home as the light turned golden. Elara had lit the hearth fire early. Smoke curled upward, thin and blue. The infant slept now, cheek pressed against her shoulder. She stood in the doorway, watching Theron approach. He stopped a few paces away. Neither moved closer. The shadow, Elara said quietly, not a question, not a plea, only the name of the thing that had been spoken. Theron looked at her, then at the sleeping child. "It will come," he said, "when it is ready." Elara nodded once. She turned back inside, carrying the child to the cradle. Theron followed, stepping across the threshold as the day's last light bled from the sky. Outside, the first stars appeared, small, cold, fixed in their places. And beneath them, the thread of the child's life continued to unspool, slow, steady, already measured to its end. The light softened as evening approached, turning the valley the colour of old bronze. Theron stood outside the house, arms folded, watching the sun sink behind the western ridge. The sky bled slowly from gold to violet, then to the deep indigo that always preceded full night. No clouds interrupted the descent. The heavens remained clear, pitilessly beautiful, as though displaying their indifference to the small lives below. Inside, Elara moved with quiet purpose. She had bathed the child in the basin, the water still warm from the hearth. Now she dried him with a soft cloth, wrapping him in fresh linen. The infant's skin glowed faintly in the firelight, smooth, unmarked, the colour of new clay. He yawned, small fists rubbing at his eyes, then settled against her shoulder, already heavy with coming sleep. Elara carried him to the cradle, laid him down gently, and covered him with the woolen blanket embroidered with faint protective symbols. She touched his forehead once, lingering there, then stepped away. Theron entered as she straightened. Their eyes met across the room. No words passed between them. Instead, he walked to the altar. The figurine of the Moirai stood as always. 3 small figures carved from olive wood, one spinning, one measuring, one cutting. The wood had darkened over generations, absorbing smoke and oil and the breath of countless prayers. He poured the evening libation, water this time, not wine. The liquid fell in a thin, unbroken thread, pooling briefly before disappearing into the stone. He did not speak the names aloud tonight. The silence felt more honest. Elara joined him at the altar. She placed a small branch of rosemary beside the figurine. Its leaves still carried the sharp scent of the herb garden. Together they stood, shoulders almost touching, watching the flame of the single lamp dance across the wood. The firelight caught the faint lines on Elara's face, deepening them, making her look older than her years. Theron felt the same weight settle on his own features. They did not move closer. Proximity would not change the thread. After a time, Theron turned away. He went to the door, opened it wide, and stepped into the yard. The air had cooled quickly. Stars began to appear, first one, then another, then a scattering, that soon filled the sky like spilled grain. He walked to the olive tree nearest the house, the one whose lowest branch he had once used as a swing when he was a child. He placed both palms against the trunk. The bark was rough, familiar, still warm from the day. Beneath it, the tree lived its slow, patient life, roots deep, branches reaching, fruit ripening in its season. No oracle spoke to the tree. No shadow lengthened across its wood. He remained there until the chill settled into his bones. Then he returned inside. Elara had prepared the pallet. She had spread fresh straw beneath the wool, smoothed the cover, but folded it back like an invitation. The child slept soundly in the cradle, breath even, small chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Theron stood looking down at him a long moment. The infant's face was peaceful, untouched by knowledge. Theron reached out, hesitated, then brushed one finger lightly along the curve of the child's cheek. The skin was soft, warm, alive. Elara watched from the hearth. She did not speak. She simply waited. Theron undressed slowly. He folded his tunic, placed it on the stool, removed his sandals, set them by the door. Every movement was deliberate, as though he were performing a ritual whose meaning he had forgotten, but whose form he still remembered. When he lay down, the pallet welcomed him with familiar creaks. Elara joined him, slipping beneath the cover. Their bodies did not press together tonight. They lay side by side, hands separate, breathing separate, yet bound by the same quiet. The lamp burned low. Its flame shrank to a narrow tongue, then steadied again. Shadows moved across the walls, long, slow, like fingers tracing the outlines what had once been whole. Outside, the night deepened. The wind moved through the olive grove, stirring the leaves in soft waves. Somewhere in the distance a night bird called, once, twice, then fell silent. The valley slept, or pretended to sleep. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and fixed, marking the hours with their slow turning. Theron stared at the ceiling beams. They were dark, heavy with smoke, etched with faint cracks that had appeared over the years. He traced them with his eyes, following the lines as though they were threads. One crack branched into two, then three. He wondered if the fates ever cracked, if their spindle ever splintered, if their measuring rod ever bent. The thought passed quickly. Such questions were useless. The loom did not bend. It only turned. Elara's hand found his beneath the cover. Her fingers slipped between his, warm, steady. She did not squeeze. She simply held. Theron returned the pressure, light, careful, as though too much force might break something fragile. They lay like that until sleep began its slow approach. It came not as mercy, but as another duty. Theron felt it settle over him like a heavy cloth, first the limbs, then the chest, then the mind. His thoughts grew thick, fragmented, drifting toward the dark place where dreams waited. But even in that drifting, he knew the shadow was there, already present, already lengthening, already inevitable. The lamp guttered once. The flame held. Outside, the first faint grey appeared along the eastern horizon, a promise of another day that would unfold exactly as the fates had measured. And in the cradle, the child breathed on, unaware, untroubled, his thread still unspooling toward the cut that waited, patient and precise, in the darkness ahead. The first frost arrived without warning. One morning the grass stood stiff and silver, blades bent under a thin glaze of ice that cracked softly beneath Theron's sandals. The air bit at the lungs, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of frozen earth and distant wood smoke. The valley lay still, as though the world itself held its breath. Theron rose in the dark, as always. He lit the lamp with hands that felt clumsy from the cold, the flame trembling before it steadied. Elara stirred beside him, then sat up slowly, drawing the blanket higher around her shoulders. The infant in the cradle made a small, waking sound, not a cry, only a soft questioning murmur. Elara lifted him, pressed him against her chest, and rocked gently until the sound quieted. Outside, the stars still burned, cold and unblinking. Theron stepped into the yard, breath clouding before him in white plumes. He walked to the goat pen first. The animals huddled close together, their bodies steaming faintly in the chill. He opened the gate, let them into the small enclosure where the sun would reach first. One kid, barely weaned, pressed against his leg, seeking warmth. Theron rested his hand on its back, felt the rapid heartbeat beneath the coarse hair. Then he moved on. At the well, the rope was stiff. The bucket rhymed with frost. He drew water carefully, the pulley groaning louder than usual. The liquid came up darker than before, carrying flecks of ice that glittered briefly before melting. He carried the full jug back to the house, set it inside the door, then returned to the field. The furrows lay unchanged, but the earth felt harder now, reluctant to yield. Theron took the plough from its resting place, beneath the olive tree. He yoked the oxen himself, their breath steaming in thick clouds, eyes calm and patient. They moved forward slowly, the blade cutting shallow lines where the ground resisted. Each step required more force, each breath came shorter. The frost clung to the ploughshare, turning the metal pale. Theron worked without pause, sweat freezing on his brow, but tunic damp against his skin. By midday the sun had burned away the silver from the grass, leaving only damp patches and the memory of cold. Theron unyoked the oxen, led them to the stream. The water ran slower now, edges crusted with ice. The animals drank deeply, muzzles breaking through the thin layer. Theron knelt beside them, cupped water in his hands, drank. The cold reached deep into his chest, steadying the ache that had begun to settle there. He returned home carrying a small bundle of winter greens he had gathered from the herb patch: thyme, sage, rosemary, their leaves still green beneath the frost. Elara met him at the door. The infant slept in the cradle, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the hearth. Elara took the greens without speaking, placed them beside the fire to dry. Then she turned to Theron. The frost came early, she said quietly, not accusation, not fear, only observation. Theron nodded once. The oracle spoke of late rains. This is the other side of the same coin. Elara looked at the sleeping child. The infant's chest rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. A single lock of dark hair curled across his forehead. She reached down, brushed it back gently. Her fingers lingered. They ate in silence. Porridge thickened with the last of the milk. A few olives, bread baked yesterday. The child woke during the meal, reached for Elara's hand. She let him grasp her finger, small fist closing tight. Theron watched them both, memorizing again the curve of the child's wrist, the way Elara's thumb stroked the back of his hand in slow circles. After the meal, Theron rose. He walked to the small chest, opened it, took out the wooden box. He carried it to the altar, placed it beside the figurine of the Moirai. Then he opened it carefully. The lock of hair lay inside, dark and curled, tied with faded linen. He lifted it out, held it between thumb and forefinger, then placed it in the shallow clay dish that served as an offering bowl. He poured a single drop of oil over the hair. The oil spread slowly, darkening the strands, making them gleam in the lamplight. Then he lit a small sprig of rosemary from the hearth flame and let it burn above the dish. The smoke rose thin and blue, sharp-scented, curling toward the ceiling beams. Elara stood behind him now. She did not touch him. She simply watched. The smoke drifted upward, then dissipated. The hair remained, unchanged, a small dark coil resting in the oil. Theron closed the box, returned it to the chest. He turned to Elara. "The shadow is not late," he said. "It has already begun to fall." Elara looked at the cradle. The child had fallen asleep again, cheek pressed against the wool, small mouth slightly open. She nodded once. Then she walked to the hearth, added another log to the fire. The flames caught quickly, throwing warmth across the room, across the sleeping child, across the two who stood watching him. Outside, the afternoon light slanted low. The frost had returned to the grass in thin silver lines. The valley grew quiet, as though listening, and in the cradle, the child's breath continued, slow, steady, measured, already counting down toward the moment when the thread would be drawn taut, then severed, clean and final, by the third sister's shears. Winter deepened slowly, as though reluctant to commit. The frost returned each night, thicker now, etching delicate patterns across the water in the basin, glazing the stones on the path. The valley turned pale, fields silvered, olive leaves curled tight against the cold, the distant sea a flat, leaden grey beneath low clouds. Smoke rose straight from every chimney, thin and white, holding the shape of the windless air. Theron moved through the shortened days with careful economy. He rose in darkness, fed the hearth first, then the animals. The goats pressed close when he opened the pen, seeking the warmth of his body. But he let them follow him to the small shelter he had built against the hillside, simple walls of stacked stone and thatch, roofed with dried reeds. Inside, he spread fresh straw, watched them settle, then closed the door against the wind that had begun to rise. The child grew quieter, not ill, not yet, just quieter. The infant who once kicked and grasped at everything now lay still for longer stretches, eyes following the flicker of firelight on the wall, small hands opening and closing slowly, as though testing the air itself. Elara carried him more often, pressed against her chest, her palm resting over his heart. The rhythm beneath her hand remained steady, but slower, as though the small body already understood the need to conserve. Each evening Theron checked the cradle. He did not touch the child often, only once, brushing the back of his knuckles along the soft cheek, feeling the warmth that still lingered there. The skin felt thinner now, almost translucent in the lamplight. Theron withdrew his hand, folded the blanket higher, then turned away. The nights lengthened. The lamp burned earlier, its flame trimmed low to save oil. Alara sat beside the hearth, mending a torn tunic with small, precise stitches. Theron sharpened tools, the sickle, the plough blade, running the whetstone along the edge in slow, even passes. The sound filled the room's soft rasp, pause, rasp again. A rhythm older than speech. When the edge gleamed, he set it aside and began another. The work was unnecessary. The tools were already sharp. But the motion steadied the hands, steadied the mind. One night the wind rose in earnest. It moved through the olive grove like a living thing, tearing at branches, rattling the thatch. Theron stepped outside, stood in the yard, arms loose at his sides. The cold pressed against him, seeking the gaps in his tunic, but he did not move. He looked up. The stars were hidden behind clouds that rolled low and heavy. No moon, only darkness, thick and complete. He returned inside. Alara had placed the cradle closer to the hearth. The child lay on his back, eyes open, staring upward. Small breaths came shallow now, each one visible in the faint mist it made. Alara sat on the floor, beside the cradle. One hand resting on the wooden edge, the other holding the child's tiny fist. She did not look up when Theron entered. He knelt opposite her. Together they watched. The firelight moved across the child's face, cheek, eyelid, the faint blue vein beneath the skin. The breaths grew farther apart, not laboured, not pained, only farther. Theron reached out. His hand covered Alara's where it rested on the cradle. She turned her palm upward, their fingers interlaced. They held without pressure, only contact. The child blinked once, slow, deliberate. Then the eyes remained open, fixed on something beyond the ceiling beams, beyond the thatch, beyond the night itself. A long pause, another breath, soft, almost inaudible, then silence. The fire crackled once. The lamp flame steadied. Alara did not cry out. She leaned forward, pressed her lips to the child's forehead, lingered there. When she straightened, her face was calm, empty, but calm. She lifted the small body gently, cradled it against her chest as though he might still need the warmth. Theron watched her rise, watched her walk to the small chest, watched her take the woolen blanket, embroidered with protective symbols. But she wrapped the child carefully, folding the edges with the same tenderness she had used every night before. Theron stood. He took the lamp from the hearth, lifted it high. The light moved ahead of them as they stepped outside. The wind had dropped. The yard lay still, frost glittering under the faint starlight that had broken through the clouds. They walked to the olive grove, beneath the oldest tree, the one split by lightning long ago. Theron had already prepared the small hollow in the earth, not deep, not grand, only sufficient. They knelt together. Alara lowered the wrapped bundle. Theron covered it with soil, then with stones smoothed by the stream. No marker, no name. The tree would know. They remained there until the cold became too sharp. Then they rose, returned to the house. The hearth fire had burned low. Theron added wood. The flames caught slowly, reluctant. Alara sat on the pallet. Theron sat beside her. They did not speak. The lamp guttered. The flame shrank to a thin blue line, then held. Outside, the night resumed its patient turning. The frost thickened on the grass. The stars reappeared, cold and fixed. And beneath the old olive tree, the small mound settled, quiet, final. Already becoming part of the earth that had cradled every thread before it, and would cradle every thread after. The seasons turned again, each one quieter than the last. Spring came soft and hesitant, green shoots pushing through soil still damp from winter melt. The valley woke slowly, flowers opening along the paths. Birds returning to the olive branches, the sea gleaming blue once more beneath a kinder sun. Theron moved through it all with the same deliberate pace. But the steps were shorter now, the breath shallower. The body remembered its age, even when the mind refused. Elora aged beside him, her hair silvered through, her hands thinner, yet steady. She tended the hearth with the same care she had once given the cradle. The small blanket embroidered with protective symbols lay folded in the cedar chest, untouched, its colours still bright against the dark wood. Neither spoke of moving it. Some things are kept not for use, but for witness. The house grew emptier in sound. No infant cries. No small feet running across the floor. Only the soft crackle of fire, the murmur of wind through the thatch, the occasional low call of goats in the pen. Theron spent longer hours in the yard. Sitting on the stone bench beneath the old olive tree, hands resting open on his knees, he watched the light change across the valley, morning gold to midday white to evening bronze. Each shift felt slower now, as though time itself had learned patience from the man who had spent his life waiting. One afternoon, the neighbour's boy, now a young man, broad-shouldered and bearded, came up the path carrying a basket of early apricots. He set it down beside Theron without speaking, then sat on the ground, back against the tree trunk. They remained in silence for a long while. The apricots lay between them, small, golden, warm from the sun. But finally the young man spoke. "My father says the oracle's words have come to pass." Not a question, only statement. Theron looked at the fruit. He reached out, took one, turned it in his fingers. The skin was smooth, faintly downy. He bit into it. The flesh was sweet, juice running down his chin. He chewed slowly. "They always do," he said. The young man nodded. He took an apricot for himself, ate it in 2 bites. Then he stood. "I will come again tomorrow," he said. With more. Theron did not answer. The young man left, footsteps fading down the path. Theron remained beneath the tree until the light began to slant low, then rose, joints stiff, back bent a little more than yesterday. He carried the basket inside. Elora met him at the door. She took the apricots, placed them on the table. Then she looked at him, really looked. Her eyes traced the lines on his face, the hollows beneath his cheekbones, the faint tremor in his hands. "You are tired," she said quietly. Theron nodded once. "I have been tired for a long time." She stepped closer. Her hand found his arm, steadying him without force. They stood like that, 2 figures in the doorway, framed by the dying light, bound by years and silence and the same measured thread. That night, Theron did not sleep. He lay on the pallet, eyes open to the ceiling beams. Elora lay beside him, breathing slow and even. He listened to her breath away. He had once listened to the child's, counting each one, marking the spaces between. The lamp burned low, its flame a narrow tongue licking the darkness. When the first grey appeared along the eastern ridge, he rose. Elora stirred, but did not wake. He moved through the house with careful steps, avoiding the loose floorboard. He lit no lamp. He needed none. The grey light was enough. He walked outside. The yard lay still, frost gone, but dew heavy on the grass. He went to the olive grove, to the small mound beneath the oldest tree. The stones had settled deeper into the earth over the years. Moss had begun to grow along their edges, soft and green. He knelt, rested one palm on the mound. The soil was cool, damp, alive. He spoke no words. There were none left to say. He remained there until the sun cleared the ridge, until warmth touched his shoulders, until the valley opened itself fully to the day. Then he rose, brushed dirt from his knees, and returned to the house. Elora waited at the door. She held a cup of warm milk and honey. He took it, drank slowly, feeling the sweetness spread through his chest. When the cup was empty, he handed it back. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither spoke of the end. They did not need to. The day passed in quiet labour, small tasks, familiar motions. He fed the goats. She swept the floor. They ate figs and bread in the shade. The young neighbour came again, this time with bread and cheese. He stayed longer, spoke of the harvest, of the rains that might come early this year. Tharon listened, nodded, said little. As evening fell, Tharon sat on the bench beneath the tree once more. Elora joined him. They watched the sky turn from gold to violet. The first stars appeared, small, cold, fixed. Tharon felt the thread within him draw taut, not painfully, not suddenly, only taut ready. He turned to Elora. His hand found hers. She held it without words. The night deepened. The lamp inside the house burned low, waiting, and beneath the old olive tree, the mound waited also, quiet, patient, already part of the earth that had taken one child and would soon take another. The shadow that had fallen so long ago now lengthened across them both, final, gentle, inevitable. The last winter came gently, almost apologetically. Snow fell in thin, silent flakes for 3 days and 3 nights, blanketing the valley in white so pure it seemed to erase every scar the earth had ever borne. The olive trees stood bowed beneath the weight, branches heavy, leaves hidden. Smoke rose from the house on the hill in a single slender column, straight and unwavering, as though the chimney itself refused to bend. Inside, the hearth fire burned low and steady, never allowed to die, never permitted to blaze. Tharon had not left the house in 7 days. His legs had grown too uncertain, the joints swollen and reluctant, each step a negotiation with pain he no longer bothered to name. Elora moved around him with the quiet efficiency of someone who has long practiced care without expectation of return. She brought the goat's milk inside, warm from the udder, strained it through cloth, warmed it again over the fire. She fed him small spoonfuls, wiping his chin when a drop escaped. He accepted each one without protest, eyes half closed, watching the flames through the narrow slits of his lids. The neighbour's son, now a man with children of his own, came every morning. He cleared the path to the door, carried wood, filled the water jug from the spring that had not yet frozen. He spoke little. When he did, his voice was soft, almost reverent. He never asked how Theron fared. He simply looked, saw, and acted. On the fourth day, he brought a small wooden bowl he had carved himself, simple, unadorned, the grain running smooth along the curve. Elara accepted it without words, filled it with milk, set it beside the pallet. Theron drank from it slowly, feeling the warmth of the wood against his palms, the faint memory of the young man's hands still lingering in the grain. Elara slept little. She sat on the low stool beside the pallet, one hand resting on Theron's arm, the other holding the embroidered blanket that had once covered their son. She did not unfold it. She only held it, fingers tracing the faded symbols in slow, absent circles. Sometimes she hummed old lullabies, fragments of songs she had sung to the child long ago. The notes came soft, cracked, yet steady, filling the spaces between Theron's breaths. On the seventh night the snow stopped. The sky cleared suddenly, stars appearing one by one like small lamps lit in a vast dark room. Theron woke from a shallow doze, eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. He looked at Elara. She looked back. In that shared glance passed everything that had not needed words for decades: gratitude, endurance, the quiet knowledge that the thread was nearly finished. He spoke then, voice thin but clear, opened the door. Elara hesitated only a moment. She rose, crossed the room, lifted the wooden bar, pushed the door wide. Cold air flowed in, pure and sharp, carrying the scent of snow and pine. Moonlight poured across the floor, silver and cold, touching the hearth, the altar, the folded blanket. Theron watched it move across his hands, turning the skin pale and luminous. "Help me stand," he said. Elara came to him. She slipped one arm beneath his shoulders, another beneath his knees. He was lighter than she expected, hollowed out, as though the years had slowly scooped him clean. She lifted with care. His feet touched the floor. He swayed once, steadied himself against her. Then, together, they walked, slow, halting steps, across the room, through the doorway, into the yard. The snow lay untouched, perfect. Each step they took left shallow prints behind them. Theron leaned on Elara, yet his back straightened slightly, as though the cold air reminded the spine of its former pride. They moved toward the olive grove. The trees stood silent sentinels, branches drooping under snow, moonlight catching in the crystals like scattered diamonds. They reached the oldest tree. The small mound beneath her, it was rounded now, softened by years and weather, moss thick along the stones. Theron stopped. Elara stopped with him. They stood together, breath clouding white, mingling in the still air. Theron looked down at the mound. Then he looked up, past the branches, past the snow, past the sky itself. The stars burned cold and bright, fixed in their ancient places. He felt the thread within him draw to its final inch. No fear moved through him. Only recognition. The same recognition he had felt the night the child stopped breathing. The same he had carried every dawn since. He turned to Elara. His hand found hers. She held it without trembling. "I kept the promise," he said quietly. "I stayed until the end." Elara nodded once. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. but freezing before they reached her chin. She did not wipe them away. Theron looked at the mound again. Then he knelt, slowly, painfully, Elora steadying him. He placed both palms on the snow-covered earth. The cold burned, then numbed. He remained there, breathing shallow, watching his breath rise and vanish. After a long time, he spoke once more, the voice barely above a whisper. Let it be finished. The wind stirred then, soft, almost tender. It moved through the olive branches, shaking loose small showers of snow that drifted downward like pale petals. One flake settled on Theron's eyelash. He blinked. Another touched his cheek. He did not move. Elora knelt beside him. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, drew him close. His head rested against her chest. She felt his heartbeat, slow now, thready, yet still present. She held him as she had held the child that last night, rocking gently, humming the same broken lullaby. The moon climbed higher. The stars turned in their slow wheel. The valley lay silent beneath the snow, cradled in its own stillness. Theron's breath grew shallower. The spaces between each one lengthened, longer, until the pause became the thing itself. The last breath left him soft as a sigh, no struggle, no sound, only release. Elora held him a while longer. Then she lowered him gently to the snow beside the mound. She arranged his arms across his chest, but straightened the hem of his tunic, brushed snow from his hair. She kissed his forehead, once, lingering, then rose. She returned to the house. She brought the embroidered blanket, unfolded it for the first time in years. She laid it over him, tucking the edges with care. Then she sat beside him in the snow, back against the tree, and watched the night continue its turning. Dawn came pale and slow. The snow glowed soft pink as the sun rose. The valley opened itself to the new day, fields glittering, trees shining. The sea far below a strip of silver beneath the light. The neighbour's son found them at first light. He saw the two figures, one lying still beneath the blanket, one sitting upright, eyes open, face calm. He did not cry out. He simply knelt, bowed his head, then rose again and walked back down the path to bring others. Elora remained until the sun stood higher. Then she stood, brushed snow from her cloak, and walked inside. She lit the lamp, trimmed the wick, set it in the window. She placed a fresh bowl of water on the altar, poured a single drop of oil into the flame. The light steadied, throwing soft gold across the room. Outside, the village gathered quietly. They carried Theron to the small hollow, already prepared beside the child's mound. They laid him down, covered him with earth, then with stones. No speeches, no laments. Only the sound of soil falling, steady and final. When it was done, they left one by one. Elora stayed until the last stone was placed. Then she turned, walked back to the house, but closed the door behind her. The lamp burned on. The fire crackled low. The embroidered blanket lay folded once more in the chest. And beneath the oldest olive tree, two mounds rested side by side, quiet, close, part of the same earth that had cradled every beginning and every ending since the first thread was spun. The valley turned beneath the sun. The seasons continued. The stars kept their watch. And somewhere, in the vast silence beyond names, the third sister lowered her shears, once, gently, finally. The loom stilled. The thread lay complete. Nothing more was required. Good night,